When your product data and your digital assets live together, that's where you're going to see the leverage. And brands that continue to scale fast aren't doing those manual works. They're designing a system where it's accurate, it's consistent, and the speed's built in there. This really allows teams to feel confident and protect their brand and grow without the chaos.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Coffee Break podcast. Today we're digging into something most brands don't think about until it hurts. Product data, images, videos, specs, descriptions. They often live in different tools, different folders, different heads. At first, that feels fine. But as brands add marketing channels, marketplaces, add teams, small cracks turn into real delays, errors, and lost sales. So today we will find out why your product data and creative assets need to live in the same place. And to help unpack this, I'm joined by Lynn Herman. Lynn is an APM Marketing Manager at Canto, a platform built to help brands store, manage, and share product content at scale. She also held leadership roles at HubSpot and Insight Squared. So let's get started. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Then we're talking about digital asset management, or in short, DAM. For listeners who are new to this, can you explain what DAM is in simple terms?
Yeah, so digital asset management, often referred to as DAM itself, is a way for you to store and manage your content. So whether that be imagery, video, PDFs, anything that you have that is an asset that's digital, it's a way to organize and manage and make sure you can distribute it in a way that's effective.
Now, most brands start with spreadsheets, folders. I do this. And when it starts growing, it becomes a problem to deal with that. What's your experience with brands coming from spreadsheets and folders and looking for a solution? What's sort of the transition there?
Yeah, specifically for product content, is that
That's
versus,
right,
yeah. So a lot of people, when they're starting out, have their product information and content in a spreadsheet, and that can be totally fine, right? I mean, if you have a few SKUs, you're starting out and you're managing it, one or two people are allowed to touch the spreadsheet, that's totally fine. The problem becomes when you start expanding, whether that's adding more SKUs or getting onto different retail sites, whether that be Shopify or retail partners, wholesale partners, Amazon, Marketplace, you name it. Each retail partner tends to have different specifications of what they need, which means that your spreadsheet that you have as your master spreadsheet needs to have 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 different variations depending on where you are selling your product and who needs the information. So that's where it can get pretty tricky because you're having to create different versions of these spreadsheets to make sure that the retailers have what they need. And as we know, more spreadsheets, more data points, more opportunity for manual error, and that can really be inefficient when you're trying to get to market as quickly as can.
Now, obviously, the core is the product data. And you said it's descriptions, it's images and all of this. If you want to get this all together in one place, and that's where you come in, how does that look on a day-to-day basis? How do I bring everything together into one source?
Sure. So when you're selling a product, obviously you have your product at the forefront, but you also have all of the assets and information associated with it. So trying to have a single source of truth is something that everyone is asking. And I feel like we hear single source of truth a lot. So the good news is it's very achievable if you think about how your product information is structured. So a true launch once, publish everywhere workflow really depends on a couple of things. So first and foremost, you want to start with your product, not all of the assets and files that are along with it. And that's probably the biggest shift for people when they're thinking about it, because your assets are going to be what sell the product itself, right? People want to know how it looks, how it feels, how people are using it, the videos, the images. But instead of organizing your content around folders and file names, what we're seeing in these high-performing brands is that they're organizing it around the product itself. So each SKU is going to have a single home. All the assets, specs, variants, documents, anything that's associated with that product can then attach to that product. So when you have a new lifestyle shoot or a new piece of user-generated content that you want to add to that image, it's going to inherit all of that product and all of the attributes automatically. So if the spec changes, every asset is going to stay aligned. So that's really where you can update once and then everything downstream stays in sync. The other thing that I want to mention when you're thinking about an all-in-one solution is approvals, right? Because most teams slow down because approvals are in different places. They might be in a Slack channel, they might be in an email, they might be in InDesign, whatever it might be. So you want to have a place where your stakeholders can remove all of the friction and review in one place. So the feedback is captured on the asset, and finally, only approved content is going to be available for publishing. So a lot of times we're going back and forth saying, is this the final version? We just want to be safe before we launch it. So that's going to eliminate that friction. And then the last thing when we think about a single source of truth and getting it out there is the channels that you're distributing the content to. So when we're finally ready to go, this means a lot of like re-uploading, making sure that you have the latest version in your system. So your system should be able to handle all of that, but also it should be able to push content directly to Shopify or deliver optimized assets to your marketplace. And then you want to be able to create curated product catalogs or a channel for your retail partners, which makes it easier for them to do business with you because they know that they're going to have something that they can work with. So that's really how brands can think about a single source of truth, I think are those three things.
Now, a lot of our listeners are running Shopify stores, and I think I want to go a little bit deeper into this because that might be a huge interest. As you
Sure.
said, from a central system, you can push into Shopify. How does that look like?
Sure. So again, you want to think of that product as your single source of truth. So Shopify is really great at helping brands get to market quickly. And we have seen that when people are starting out, that sometimes they're using Shopify as their hub for their product information and their images live there. But what you want to do, especially when you start working, and we see a lot of brands do this today, whether that's user generated content or a new lifestyle or a new season, a new campaign, you're constantly going to have to be updating those images to associate with the right product. As soon as you have these new content pieces in place, you want to be able to have the right approvals in place as well. So when you add that image, you want to make sure that you can just push it and you have like, that's the latest version. We know that legal approved it. This is cleared to be used. So having a single source of truth that starts with your product and all the assets are associated with it is going to allow you to have it live on Shopify and push it directly, and vice versa. If you change something on Shopify, be able to sync it back to your system of record so that we know that it's always up to date and always accurate.
You mentioned before there's obviously different sources of content or different types of content,
hmm
user-generated content,
hmm
product marketing content, and so on and so forth. With that, you have different players in the game who are responsible for these things.
Right.
How do you bring different users together in the system, and how does the version control work?
Sure. So what you can do, especially if you're working with a photographer or you're working with a ambassador, you want to give them the ability to feel authentic and have their content because that's what you're using them for, right? Especially when it comes to user generated content. But you also want them to represent your brand in a way that is your brand. So but there's a couple different things that you can do is you can create these brand portals, brand guidelines that you can then share with your ambassadors so that they know exactly, okay, this is the size that I should use. Should I film in landscape or should I film portrait? Like there's so many little nuanced things that can really impact. And what you can do is allow them, share an upload link with them so that when they're done with their content, they can upload it to your system of record, your digital asset management system, whatever you're using. But then you can set internally permissions so that not something is going to be uploaded, that it has to go through a little bit of a approval process before it can be used. So you can give them the ability and the flexibility to say, hey, whenever you're done with your content, you can upload it. They have resources available to them to know exactly if you launch a new product, you can have all of the product descriptions, what the product does, how to talk about it, how to use it, both internal and externally for the teams. And then they can upload the content when you're ready. And then the team itself who manages that content can go through their approval process as they normally would.
Now, Canto as a platform helps in scaling. Can you give me some examples of brands? You don't need to name the brands that you work with, just telling our listeners what kind of results they saw and what are the benefits.
Definitely. I think that there's a lot of what I see is almost these like hidden benefits, right? Is that you don't realize they're a problem until they're a problem. And one of the biggest things that we've seen is the time that it takes at the back and forth. You might be looking for, so one of our brands, Kinders, they talked about the time that it took each day to find the right asset that was associated to their product because they were scaling, they were adding new products, their SKUs were growing by the thousands, and it was just super time consuming. So they're saying, if I spend 30 minutes a day looking for an asset, that times five people that are doing that, it can really get into super time consuming efforts. The other thing that we've seen and why people have come to us is because potentially a image was different on their Instagram versus their D2C website versus if they're selling on Amazon or they're selling on Nordstrom. And so users and people who are customers are so savvy these days. They're going to, I mean, you've seen it. They spot the most minute detail and they flag it and they put it on the internet and now it becomes an issue. So if there's that lack of trust in what you see because your images or your specs are different, then that is not only going to potentially have the buyer not buy something in the first place, but it could lead to returns. It could lead to marketplaces, your listing getting turned off maybe automatically. And oftentimes that doesn't necessarily show up as a product content issue. It's, a customer operations issue, or a customer experience issue, performance issue. So things are not necessarily showing up in a way, but you're like, oh, it's because things weren't consistent, things weren't connected. I lost trust in my consumer. And now we're paying the price for that.
It's very interesting. I never thought about it, but that totally makes sense because all sellers nowadays are omni-channel or should be omni-channel, and it's easy to mix up things there. With the growing business, when is the right moment to integrate a digital asset management system?
So I think that there's two ways to think about it. And what we hear a lot about is people saying, okay, I think I'm going to start, I'm selling on Shopify and it's good for right now, but I think I want to start selling to other retail partners, or I think I'm going to partner with other brands. These are key signs that people might be ready for something bigger. Because if you have, say you don't even have a digital asset management system, but you're thinking about one, if you sell a product, you really need to think about a DAM that's built for products, because not a lot of DAMs are. They're built as a typical organization system. So I think that that's something that if you're thinking about, okay, I want to get into a new market, I want to sell on Amazon, I want to sell on Nordstrom, I want to sell on Target, whatever it might be, you're looking to expand, you're looking to add product lines, you're looking to invest in ambassadors who are going to produce content for you as well. This might be a key sign that you're ready to have something more, not only for yourself, but for your retail partners and the people that you're going to work with, because retail partners want to make sure that brands are easy and consistent and can work with them in a timely fashion. So having yourself set up, especially in a way that you're organized around your product and you have all of the assets tied to that product and you don't have to worry, that's going to be, I think, one of the key signs. Okay, I think I'm ready for something more. The other thing we see too is storage. It can get costly if you're using something on a Dropbox or Spreadsheets. It can get a little hard to search for items too. So if you're constantly saying, hey, you're hacking the system in your Dropbox by naming a file name, the SKU and V1 of that and red, it can get a little out of control. So having a system in place where you really can take the element of search out of it with an AI component. So if you are selling outdoor equipment and you're selling to like Dick's Sporting Goods or REI, and you're like, okay, I need to have woman wearing red backpack next to river, you can type that in and then get that content to them. So that's going to be something that I think a lot of people are saying, okay, I wish I had this. And that's going to be maybe where they want to move to.
I can totally relate to the Dropbox issue. I had a supplier working on Dropbox with hundreds of SKUs, and it was a little bit time consuming. I totally can relate this. Now, who's your perfect customer? Are there specific verticals or industries where this works better than in others?
Yeah, so I think what's really great is that when you're a DAM that's built for products, if you have a SKU and you have an asset, we're really industry agnostic. But we've seen, especially when you are selling on different retailers, different websites, whether that's retail, CPG, luxury. I mean, what's nice about the system that we built in place is we think about your product and we think about all the assets that go along with that. And that's really everybody, and not necessarily even if you're selling on multiple retail websites. If you have distribution partners and you need to get them the right catalogs in place, if you're only working one or two, that's really going to be effective. But I think brands who are starting out and have SKUs, looking to expand their SKUs, looking to expand their variants, their sizing, whatever it might be, and it's getting a little hard to manage with what you're doing, I think it's a good time to think about it. But yeah, what's nice about our system is that it's built around your product and not the other way around. So whatever you're using, like we have a team in place that can help you build around the product itself.
Is there any kind of homework that a brand needs to do before they can get started?
Well, we have homework. Let's see. I mean, I think that most people start out with their spreadsheets and their folder systems, and that's fine. I think it's about how you want to grow. So what's nice about this system is that it's going to fit you for where you're currently at, but where you also want to be. So I think having a nice plan in place of saying, okay, in the next, 5 years, I want to think about expanding to different markets. I want to think about expanding to different regions. So you want to think about building a system that's going to be able to grow with you and grow with the SKUs. So I think of like who needs to have access to it, who are going to be the stakeholders, who's going to manage it. Those are things that are more practical. But I think also when you're thinking about expanding into the future, what are your goals? That way we can align the system. I mean, we can always pivot and create what we need to create, but I think it's important to think about how you want to make this more efficient for internal and external teams to be able to interact with you and your product.
Walk me through the typical onboarding process for a new user. What steps are involved? How long does it take to get up and running?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on how many SKUs you have, how many files you have, and where you're currently at today. But what's so nice about our implementation team is they take a really hands-on approach of how you want to manage this and how you want to move forward. So depending on, is in place, it could be, as simple as a couple weeks to get everything uploaded. It really just depends on where you're starting today. I don't have too much experience on the implementation team itself, but I do know that it really is a hands-on approach because we want to get it right the first time. And whatever you're using today, we can take that as a starting point, which is nice. So we can see how you're managing it, seeing how it's organized today, and then give you some tips and pointers on what we've seen because we've done thousands of these at this point. So we know what works for different industries. So, because if you are, a CPG company, it's going to be something that might look a little bit different than manufacturing. So we can tailor how it's organized and how it's built based off of our experience and where you're starting at today.
Now, a big question is always, how is the pricing working? What kind of pricing structure do we offer?
Yeah. So again, I'm not in sales, so I'm not going to give the final line on this, but I do know that a lot of what we work with today are how many SKUs you have and how much storage you need. So it's pretty simple in terms of where we're at, but we offer a really full suite aspect. So if you are a retailer, like we have a whole suite of that's specifically designed for you. Something that if you're interested, we can talk to our team specifically, but I do think that we've really taken a different approach in how we have created a product to not just be okay, it can do this, this, and this. We think about your whole entire product and content life cycle and how we can interact with that, because we want to make sure that the products that you're using today, especially when it comes from like an integration standpoint, like we know teams are going to be able to use Canva or, Asana or Monday. Like there's so many other touch points. So we've curated a product that allows you to have everything that you need and to be efficient for the different teams, but to be a single source of truth. So we've been able to build a suite that's really going to be effective on that, but our sales team can talk more about the pricing there.
Yeah, I definitely see the advantages of a digital asset management system. I hold myself as a seller. I've been a seller for about 7-8 years on Shopify with a small team. And at some point, it became really, really messy because of that you mentioned there. So I think asset management is an integral part, or should be an integral part, of every growing business out there. Before our coffee break comes to an end today, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways that if you're listening today, I think it's when product data and creative assets live in different places, that's really where friction is going to grow and be potentially an issue. So if your product is in a spreadsheet or in multiple spreadsheets or an ERP system, and your assets are in a shared drive or a DAM, or sometimes we even see people on their desktops because they just want to file that's right there. That's where it can really be inefficient. So when these two things live together, when your product data and your digital assets live together, that's where you're going to see the leverage. And brands that continue to scale fast aren't doing those manual works. They're designing a system where it's accurate, it's consistent, and the speed's built in there. This really allows teams to feel confident and protect their brand and grow without the chaos. So I think that if you think about a system, you sell a product, your product is everything to you, but also your brand's everything to you as well. So having a system in place that connects those, but at the core starts with your product is going to be something if you're thinking about a way to manage your assets and your product information. That's something I want to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary. And the core is really the product because that's what you're selling. Where can people go and find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a website, our Canto.com. Feel free to check that out. Specifically for Canto DAM for products, if you just go down there, you'll see Canto DAM for products. It's a great place for you to check out all the information. We have customer stories. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. We have an extraordinary social media marketing manager who is always providing great content on our LinkedIn website. And so feel free to go to LinkedIn and our website, and we're always doing webinars and sharing customer stories. So feel free to check us out there.
Cool. I will put the links in the show notes as always, then you're just one click away. Thanks so much for giving us an overview of what this digital asset management can do. And I hope a lot of our listeners will reach out to you and become clients. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Klaus.